In this video, we are going to discuss 5 critical chess endgames that every player must know in order to master the endgame skills. So I can guarantee you guys that after watching this video, your endgame skills are going to increase by 100%. So make sure to watch this video till the end. So let's start. So we have the endgame number 1. It's black to play. Try to pause the video and try to think, how are you going to continue the position if you are playing with the black pieces? Okay, so first of all, if you did not have a nice deep thought, make sure to pause the video and try to find the idea how should black try to continue the position. And if you found the idea, then yeah, you can resume the video. So it's black to play, and you will realize that white is having all his pieces into the attack. So what black should do here is try to trade off as many pieces as possible. So if you found the move rook b to c8, congratulations, that's the best move. If you try to play rook hc8, it's not really working because black is simply getting mated. So you have to play rook bc8, and white have to trade one pair of the rooks. And here white simply took the pawn on a6. Because if white takes the rook over here, this is already better for black because this pawn is already collapsing, and now suddenly the black king is much more activated compared to the white king, which gives black a big advantage. So here white took the pawn, and here black played the move rook to d8. So here, what's the idea of playing rook d8? So first of all, black wants to activate his rook by giving a check, but he can't do so because the white queen is already covering the c1 square. So here, black simply played rook to d4, or rook to d8, an idea to play rook to d1. If black decides to capture the h4 pawn, it's not really working up because of rook to a7, a very strong move, with the idea of rook h7 check coming up. So king goes over here, now rook a4, cutting off the king, and now there are many checks coming up. So for example, queen takes the pawn, queen check, rook king goes to g2. You can't play the queen over here because rook g4 is a very strong move. You can't take the rook, you are losing the queen. So that's why the king moved, and after rook h4, you can already realize that black is kind of at the verge of getting mated. So this is already not the best way for black to play. Rook to d1, rook to d8, the best move was found by the player. Queen to e2 with the idea of threatening f4 and also covering the d1 square. Queen to f4 now, activating the queen, stopping pawn push, and also threatening some ideas of queen check. So we have rook to a7 with the idea of rook h7 getting mated. King goes back to h6. Rook goes to c7, covering the c1 square. Rook goes to d2 finally, activating the pieces. And now we have queen to e1. If queen goes to e4, trading off the queen, this is already like fine possession after f5. It's kind of equal, but you can already see that black is kind of practically much better. But queen to e1 was played, and now we have rook to d3 with the idea of capturing the pawn maybe. White tries to activate the king, but now queen into pawn, check, king h5, and suddenly like black king is not really getting mated. Like after rook h7 check, I can play king g4, and my king is not really getting mated. a4. So after a4, you can already realize suddenly white king has become weak. Definitely white is trying to push his pawns on the king side, queen side, which is the only hope for white pieces. But now we have queen check, rook comes in between, and now black starts to push the pawn. We have b3 with the idea of threatening rook to c5. So check, and now we have f5. And after f5, we have queen g1 threatening mate in 1, but now simply king into h4 capturing another pawn. This is completely winning suddenly. We have a5, and now we have rook to c2, the finishing blow. You can't take the rook because the rook is already up. So white pushed the pawn, but now we have check. And after queen d3 check, white decided to resign the game. Why? Because it's a check, you have to come over here, and rook a2 is already a mate. So can you already realize how from this even position, like it looks like white is the one dominating the position, but suddenly black literally twisted the game into the black's favor. How? You ask, because like you need to find the best logical moves, and also the moves by which you can activate your pieces like this. Like black didn't play it passively, but black played actively, and it definitely paid off. Like black seized the moment, pushed his pawn, and eventually won the game. So this was the first diagram, a very interesting one. So now let's move on to the second diagram. Okay, so we have the second position on our board. Again, this time it's a white to play. So try to pause the video and try to think, how are you going to continue the position if you're playing with the white pieces? It's a hard puzzle, so try to think a deep pause. Okay, so what's happening in this position? It's white to play. So first of all, like black rook is activated, attacking the h2 pawn. White king is also pretty much activated. Uh, so like it looks like many people will think, okay, let's push the a pawn because the a pawn was simply hanging. Yeah, if you push the a pawn, like it's a fine move. White is still better. But if you found the move, which is g4, congratulations, because g4 is kind of an idea. What is an idea? So after g4, first of all, white is never going to get back rank mated because now g2 square is empty for the king. And second, a very interesting idea here is, like for example, if black tries to capture the pawn, we have bishop c5 and white is already winning the piece. Like it looks like after rook e8, black is defending up, but after rook b1, rook b7 is coming up and you can't defend it. Like for example, if king f8, I can take over e7 and play rook b7, you are losing the rook. If you try to play king f6, now the g4 moves come into the picture, I can play g5 check. If you take the pawn, I can capture the piece. You have to go back and now I can get the rook in and I'm still winning a piece. And if you try to play rook to c2 in the position, rook to b7, and you are still losing the piece, you can't do anything, white is completely winning. So this is exactly what happened. Why rook e2 is a blunder? In the game we had rook e8, which is the best move. Like you try to defend the bishop, and now we have rook d1. Why? With the same idea of getting the rook into the picture, because you can't play rook b1 because the b1 square is already covered up. So you play rook d1. The king goes to g6, and now you play finally a4. You realize now that, like you first of all, you can't really take the pawn because you're still losing the material after rook to d7 with the idea of bishop c5. Like for example, if king f8, I can still take over here and bishop c5 is winning, yeah? So still king g6, and now we have a4, rook to b4, rook to d4. We have a5, and now what white did was, he simply traded one pair of the rooks, because if you try to keep as many heavy pieces on the board, the drawing chances simply increases. So here, black took the rook with the bishop. If black takes the rook with the pawn, white can already push a5, bishop goes to f6, push, 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 and now we have rook b7, stopping the queen, and now white is going to simply activate his king. This pawn is extremely too strong, and white is already winning the game. I think white can even push the rook, like push the rook to b8. This is completely winning. So we have bishop b4, that's why. King g2, and it still looks like an even position. But you can try to still think and try to find the way, how should white try to continue the position? Okay, so it requires an idea, it requires imaginations, it requires creativity. So king g2, white is trying to activate his king. As you know that in endgame you should even try to activate your king. So we have rook to d8, first black trying to activate his rook. h4 finally a very strong move in the position, getting maximum space on the king side. h5 also threatened up. So h6, h5 check, and now we have king h7. Even if black tries to play king f6, trying to centralize the king, it's not really working up. Because of king f3, rook goes over here. White even tries to activate his king even further with the idea of f4 coming up. So black gave a check. Black came back. Rook a7 attacking the pawn. Check. Bishop goes over here, but now bishop to d4 check. And you lose the g7 pawn and eventually the game. So basically it's completely winning because like white can even push the pawn to f4, g5. This is completely still winning. So that's why we have king h7, but now king f3. The same thing. Rook goes to the last rank. King to e4, rook to g1, f3 attacking the rook and also protecting the pawn. King to d3, check. King goes to c2, pushing the pawn with the idea of pushing the pawn even further with g5. And now we have g6, now trying to blockade the king, and now maybe some back rank ideas can be possible. So rook to f5, check, bishop f8, rook a8, takes, bishop to b6. Now it looks like white is pawn down, it should be fine for black. But the problem here is the activity. Black is having zero activity compared to white having 100% of activity. With his king, with his bishop, with his rook, with his pawn. And now we have rook over here, white captures the pawn, and basically what's happening here is, first of all, white pieces are much more activated, and second, white is also having a side pass pawn. So we have this position, the bishop comes back, rook goes over here, trying to cut off the black king, and now white simply activating his king, trading off the rook finally, and just pushing the pawn. A6 is completely winning because e2 is met with bishop coming back covering the square. The bishop can't come between to cover the square, and I can push the pawn and make a queen. White is totally winning. So this was a very fantastic diagram to show you guys the importance of active king compared to the passive king. So you must try to, first of all, kind of make your opponent pieces passive, activate your pieces, and eventually have practically 100% of chances to win the game. So this was the second position. So now let's move on to the third position. Okay, so we have the third position on our board. It's a very interesting one and it's a bit easy one. So it's white to play. Try to pause the video and try to find a winning idea from the white side. How will you try to continue the game? Okay, so what's happening? First of all, white's a pawn. The pawn is going this way. So black's idea is to get the king over here. Like the moment the king reaches over there, it's fundamentally a theory a draw. So if you found the move rook a1, that's a brilliant move. Like if you even found the move rook to a8, it still do the same thing. What is the idea? The idea is like after king e6, you can simply play rook d1, simply cutting off the black king, and now your idea is to simply push the pawn, and that's it. You are simply winning. It's a check, and you must play king a5. Why? If you try to play king c5, it gives black some hopes, like rook to b8, and you have to play rook d6 check, and it's getting a bit complicated, I would say. And if you try to play something like king c6, trying to push your pawn, it's already a blunder. It's a draw position now, as black can keep checking your king and just put your rook over, like put his rook like just ahead of the pawn. You can't push the pawn, you are losing the pawn. If you try to get the king over here, I can simply start checking. It's a draw. So that's why the best way to play here is king a5, pushing the pawn to c5, pushing the pawn even further to c6, rook d8, trying to trade off the rooks now. We can happily trade now because this is completely winning endgame now. c7, king goes to d7, king b7, and I can make the queen, and that's a winning endgame for white. So that's how you can easily play this position, like how to play whenever you are pawn up and your opponent king is far away. Just cut off the file, and now you can focus on pushing your pawn. Like your opponent will try to somehow trade off the rooks, but until then you can keep pushing your pawn and eventually have a winning position. That's how you win this game. So this was the third diagram, a very interesting one, a very interesting rook endgame. So now let's move on to the fourth diagram. Okay, so we have the fourth position on our board. This time it's black to play. Try to pause the video and try to find the best idea from the black side and what's happening. Okay, so like what's happening in this position? So white is trying to push his a pawn, black is trying to push his d pawn. So white's idea is first of all to get his king like ahead of the pawn to blockade this pawn, and then he will start pushing his pawn and eventually win the game. So black must not allow white to simply put the king in front of the pawn. So if you found the move d3, congratulations. And now, first of all, if white tries to push his a pawn, you can simply push your d pawn. White can't make the queen because you can take it. White can't take the rook because you can make the queen, and that's winning. So white have to go passive, and this is still a draw. White will take the pawn, and it's a draw. Okay. But king f2. Here's the question. And now the problem here is if you push the pawn, the king will come over here. You can't push the pawn, and I can get the rook, capture the pawn, and it's winning. Or I can even push the pawn, the a pawn, and that's winning as well. So you can't push the d pawn. So what's the move in this position? Try to pause the video. Okay, so if you found the move rook to e8, that's the best move. Why? It's the same thing. You are trying to cut off the king, and now your idea is to simply push the pawn. So we have rook a2. If a7, you can push the pawn, and now like white can't push the pawn because you can take it. And like if white tries to put the rook over here, you can simply put the rook over here, takes, and that's draw. And if white tries to make some random move, you can also make random move because neither side of the players can make any progress, and that's the draw. So that's why a7 is also not working. So we have rook a2, stopping black from pushing the pawn. But now black can even play the move rook e7. stopping white's advancement of the pawn. We have rook to d2. If white pushes the pawn, we can also push the pawn. White takes, we takes, and that's the draw. So we have rook goes over here, but then rook over here. And after, like, if rook a2, you can push the pawn, that's a draw. So rook takes, and that's a draw. That's how you draw the game in this position. It looks like maybe white can get his king, and that's losing. But you must remember the idea of cutting off the file. That's a very important thing in the game of chess and in the game of endgame. Trying not allowing your opponent to activate his king or activate his pieces. Just cutting off the king. That's it. This was the fourth diagram, a very interesting one. So now let's move on to the final diagram of the day. Okay, so we have the final diagram of the day on our board. It's the fifth diagram. It's black to play. Many pieces are on the board, but it's a kind of an end game, like a middle game which is going into the end game. So try to pause the video and try to think, how are you going to play this position if you are playing with the black pieces? Okay, so first of all, many things are happening up. It looks very interesting position. Black is on the driver's seat attacking the white king. So what's happening? Like first of all, white is attacking the rook. So first of all, if you found the move queen g4, that's an amazing idea. And how to find this particular move is a question, like how to find this move. So first of all, I want to take the pawn and I want to mate him, but I can't do so because the queen is already protecting the h3 pawn. Okay, so I can't do that. Can I play queen g4? Can I somehow remove the queen from here? So queen g4 you can't take with the pawn because the pawn is pinned. I'm protecting the rook as well. If you take the queen, that's the best move, because if you try to go back with the queen, I can already take over here, and that's me. That's the game over. So I'd have to take. It's a force move. So always try to calculate first the force move. I take back, and now we have rook to a1, because black's idea is already to take the pawn, and that's mate. So rook a1 trying to trade off the pieces. As I said, whenever your opponent is attacking, try to trade off the rooks. Try to trade off the pieces. Black is trying to avoid the trade, attacking the bishop. Okay, so we have rook to d1, and it's your chance. Try to pause the video and try to find the best move for black in this position. It's an awesome move to be played. Try to pause the video. Okay, so first of all, if you came up with this move, I'm not really having any words. Your level is simply mind-blowing. If you found the move g3, that's awesome. That's nearly next level understanding, I would say, of the endgame. You're already a master. What's the idea of g3 first of all? Like, it's a very deep idea. After g3, you're kind of allowing your opponent to trade off the rook, and it looks like it's an opposite color bishop. It should be a draw. But guys, as I always say, the activation of the king in the endgame is very critical, but in this position, white can't really activate the king. How? So first of all, I'm attacking the pawn. So in the game, we had c5. If white can give a check, put the rook to c8, takes, and he can take the 2 pawns. But the problem after bishop c5 here is you will realize white can't really activate his king. Definitely black is a pawn down, but white is having just a king on the king in the corner, which can always be back rank mated. And at the same time, the white king can never be activated. So this is already winning actually, though it's hard bit. But okay, let's go into the game. We have c5, black took the pawn, c6, takes, and now we have rook to f4. And now we have rook to b1. So even if white tries to trade off the pair of rook, for example, rook a7, attacking the pawn, you can't defend it with the bishop because I can capture the bishop. So you have to play rook f2. And now the point here is, if you try to take the pawn, I can play rook d2 with the idea of attacking the bishop and also threatening one movement. So that's the wrong idea of capturing the pawn. You have to play rook to a2 and you have to trade off the rooks. And it looks like an even position because it's an opposite color bishop. But the main problem for white here is his king is not really activated. Now black can play bishop c5, locking up the white king. And now this is winning. How? Bishop goes over here. Black tries to activate his king. Like this. Push his pawn to g5, putting all his pawns at the dark square finally. And now kind of making a zugzwang position. Now the pawns can't move. The pawns can't move. The king can't move. So the only piece that can move is the bishop. So you move the bishop. Black is just playing. And now we have king over here. A very interesting move. Not playing king c5. Because here white can defend it. And white can defend everything. So that's why first playing king c4, allowing, like forcing white to make a committal decision, and now playing king over here. White can no longer defend the pawn. If white defends over here, now we have king to d4. Okay, we have actually king over here, yeah. And now you are losing this pawn, you can't defend the pawn, and that's losing. So the bishop goes over here, and I can capture the pawn, and now this is winning. I can take the pawn, I can trade one pair of the pawn, and I can push the pawn and win the game. So that's why trading of the rooks also doesn't help white. So that's why we have rook to b1. The bishop goes back, check, and now we have rook f7. If you try to get the rook over here, now I can even sacrifice everything, and this is a draw. Yeah, because the rook goes back, white can play bishop a6, and this is actually a draw, but hard draw, I would say. So we have rook f7, and now a very strong move after bishop c4, which is d4, a very strong move. You can't take with the bishop because it's one move mate. You have to take with the pawn, and now we have rook over here, attacking the bishop. The bishop goes back, rook goes over here, attacking the bishop once again. The rook goes back. If white tries to trade off this pawn, king f6, and now you can no longer defend the bishop, and I'm also threatening one move mate. So you have to go back with the rook, defending the bishop. Now I play rook to d4. I activate the rook, and I can protect the pawn. And now, like, white puts the pawn, but after rook c2, white decided to resign the game because of a very simple reason, because white is getting back rank mated. Back rank mated is the serious problem white is facing all the time. And the reason he resigned because he has to go back, and now black can capture the pawn, and also this pawn falling up. Black can push these pawns and eventually win the game. So a very interesting endgame, like black literally sacrificed a pawn, and in the exchange, what he received was a weak king which can't move, a blocked king in the jail, and black simply activated all his pieces and went on to win the game. So this is how the endgame works. You do not play on the material, you play on the activation, you play on the active pieces. That's how you play the endgame. And if you once you know this fundamental, your endgame skills are definitely going to increase by 100%. And I think after watching this video, the video is coming to an end. And I'm pretty sure that after watching these 5 endgames, your level have definitely improved by 100% of the endgame. If it did, then make sure to like the video, share this video with everyone, and make sure to subscribe to our channel if you're new to our channel. And if you want any particular video on any particular topic, make sure to tell me in the comment box below, and I'm definitely going to make a video on it. So thank you for watching, and I'm going to see you soon. So till then, stay tuned and keep watching Oneshot Chess.